Hi everyone, my name's Mary and I'm here at the WSU Breadlab in the Port of Skagit of Western Washington. And today we're going to be showing you how to make a simple whole wheat sandwich bread that we like to call the approachable loaf. So we're going to be following this recipe that I printed off of our website just this morning. So you can go on there and click on the unsifted tab and then you'll see a link to the approachable loaf recipe. So this was designed by a friend of the lab, Jeff Yankelo, along with members of the Bread Lab to create sort of a bridge between an artisan loaf to a soft and squishy sandwich loaf that is whole grain and contains no non-food ingredients and 7 or fewer ingredients. So let's get started. First of all, one of a baker's greatest tools is a kitchen scale. Now, don't worry if you don't have one of these at home. We also have volume measurements on the recipe, and we'll be saying these as well while we do our loaf. Then you'll also need, or can use, a bench scraper like this. So this is a metal one, and then this is a plastic one. If you decide to invest in one of these, I highly recommend the metal one because you can use it while you're doing puzzles as well. If you've been doing jigsaw puzzles during the pandemic, I like to use this to scrape up my puzzle pieces and then stick it in the right location. It works really great. Now, we also can use a bowl along with a loaf pan. Now, our loaf recipe is going to make 2 loaves, so we'll have 2 empty ones, but it'll be just fine. And then also a whisk. For our ingredients, we have 100% unsifted whole wheat flour. And basically this just means that whenever the kernel goes into the mill, you get the whole kernel out of the mill. And then we have our sourdough starter, salt, some yeast, and it says strawberry yogurt. It was just too cute not to remove, so it's not strawberry yogurt, just yeast. And some honey, olive oil, water. And then we also use some pan spray for the pan before we put the dough in, but you could also use butter or olive oil for that as well. All right, so let's get started, and we're gonna do our first mix. So we have to take our flour, which was 773 grams, or if you're doing volume metrics, it's 5 cups and then a 3/4 cup, so 5 3/4 cups. And I measured this out already with our scale. And then now you're going to add your water, honey, and olive oil. And a little trick that we like to do is to add all of the liquid ingredients into the water first and then add them to the flour. It just makes it a little bit easier with cleaning up and getting everything in there. So we have our water, which I measured out already, and it's 710 grams. Or if you're doing volume metrics, it's about 3 cups of water. And then here's our olive oil, and this is about 45 grams of oil, or if you're doing the volume, it's a 1/4 cup plus 2 teaspoons. So we'll pour that in. Kind of pretty, all those bubbles. And we're going to squeeze in 45 grams of honey, and then if you're doing the volume, it would be a 1/4 cup plus 2 teaspoons. $45 on the dot. Whoa, that never happens. All right. So now this is where our whisk can come in handy. Just get it all mixed really well. And now we just pour this into our flour. Now if you have a KitchenAid mixer and you want to use a mixer and save your arms, you can do that. But it really isn't too much work to do it by hand. And I actually think the cleanup is easier, so I like to do it this way. And I'm going to use our little plastic scraper to just kind of gently mix everything together. And the cool thing about this recipe is it's really forgiving. So if the measurements are a tiny bit off, it's probably fine. If you feel like you've never mixed before, you're not sure if you're doing right, it's probably fine. This was designed to make it simple, so don't worry. And we're just going to try and get everything, all the flour, so it's like a little bit wet. Just a cute little dough blob. All right, so I think that's about good, and we'll just let that sit for about 30 to 45 minutes. And you can cover it with a towel or even another bowl if you want, but I'll just use a towel here. All right, so we've let this rest, and now we're going to add our starter and yeast. So our sourdough starter, we have 273 grams, or about a cup of starter. So I have two, put that there. So I fed this last night, and then let it sit out so it was ready to use today. And we also have on our website some directions on how to start a starter and then also how to feed a starter. So if you're interested in that, check it out there. It's in the same place as where the approachable loaf recipe is. So that is our sourdough starter, and then here is our not strawberry yogurt, aka yeast. So now we get to mix, and when I do this, I like to have a little bowl of water with me, and I'll stick my hands in there. Just kind of helps it not stick to your hands quite as much. And we're going to just really incorporate the starter and the yeast. And then at that point we can add, Now you'll notice I'm not a professional baker, but I think that's a good thing. It shows you that anybody can do this. And I really hadn't baked much until I started my PhD program here. So it's been a few years, and we're getting it done. So I'd say that's incorporated enough. And now we'll add our salt. And it is, 20 grams of salt, or if you're doing the volume measurements, about 2 tablespoons and a teaspoon of salt. So now we'll mix this.
You're twisting the bowl.
I am twisting the bowl as I'm doing this. I like that method. There's definitely a million and one ways to do this. You can throw your expectations out the window and just see what happens. The really nice thing about using a loaf pan is it's extremely forgiving, and it's almost always going to taste good. So it might take a while to get this incorporated. Sometimes if I'm noticing it's really sticky, I might just let it sit for a little bit and just let the dough rest and then come mix maybe 10 minutes later. That tends to work well. Or maybe it's working fine for you. So yeah, this is looking great. So right now we're getting everything really incorporated. And so I think I will let this sit for about 10 minutes and come back and mix a little bit more. So I'll let that rest, and we'll see you in 10 minutes. All right, so we're back, and we let this rest for a few minutes, and now we're going to get in here and really mix it. So I'm wetting my hands a little bit, and here we go. And if you notice, it's not quite as sticky. It's a little bit more smooth now. Keep doing this for a good while, maybe even 4 or 5 minutes. But if your hand's getting really tired, it's okay to take a minute or two, let it rest, get back in there. And honestly, even if you don't mix it that much, it's going to be fine. So that's the beauty of this recipe. All right, so here we are. We've been mixing for about 5 minutes, and you can see we're starting to get some more gluten development. This is a little bit what we're looking for. And so next we're going to do something it's called bulk fermentation, which basically just means we're going to let the bacteria and yeast do their job for us, and we'll let it sit for about 30 to 40 minutes, and then we'll come back and do a fold. All right, so here we are. We just finished up the first half of our bulk fermentation, and now we're going to do a fold. So I'm going to get my hands damp, and we just pull and fold the dough, and then we turn, fold again, and then we'll do it 2 more times the opposite way. There we go. And now we will do the second half of our bulk fermentation, so let it rest for another 30 minutes. So now we're just finishing up from our second bulk ferment, and now we are going to pre-shape the dough. And just a disclaimer, like I said, I'm not a professional baker, so this is just how I do it. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. I like to sprinkle a little flour, and then we'll pour our dough out. And you can kind of use your little scraper to get these pieces out. So at this point, if you wanted to be very precise, you could have scaled out your whole dough and then actually weighed when you divide to make 2 loaves, because this is going to be 2 loaves here. But I'm really not a perfectionist, and I like to just eyeball it, figure that it will end up being okay. So then, at this point, we can really honestly just use the scraper. And you're just trying to build or get tension with the tabletop and make a little dough blob. This is called pre-shaping. So that looks good to me. Now we'll come do our other one. Whoops. Like I said, not a professional. And same thing as before, this does not have to be perfect. It's going to go in a tin. So it's going to end up okay no matter where you are. And then now we'll just let that sit for about 30 minutes. All right, so we're back, and now we are at the shaping phase. Same thing as before. A lot of people have many different methods to shape. This is just one. And I like to spray a little bit of flour down. And then, oops, we grab our dough. And I kind of flour up my hands too. Stick in there so I don't have to plop it. And now I'm kind of just get that out and then pull. And you're just kind of folding it in, rolling it up. And then pop it in the pan. One more time. There we go. And now our next phase is proofing. So we're just going to let this sit at room temperature and let it rise. All right, so we're going to take a look and see where we're at right now. Let's see. Looks like it's coming along quite nicely. What we're looking for is really just that the bread has risen to about the edge of the pan. And it kind of looks like this one over here is coming along a little bit quicker than this one, so perhaps my measurements were off a little bit. Maybe we had more dough on this side. I'll probably let it sit maybe another 10 minutes, but we're really close. And this would also be a really good time to start preheating your oven. So you want to put your oven at about 425 degrees Fahrenheit. You actually hear ours going in the distance. But yeah, we'll let this sit for 10 minutes and then we'll be good to go. All right, so we're back with our loaves and they look like they're just about right. This one maybe is a little higher, but they both look great. So I think we're gonna put them in the oven. And just a note on our oven, as you can see, it's quite large and fancy, and I'm guessing you probably don't have one of these at your house, and that's totally okay. But just a note is this oven does steam the bread, so when it comes out, it's probably going to look a little bit different than yours. And if you can figure out how to steam your oven, by all means go for it, but I've never been able to figure it out, and I always just use my oven as is and it turns out okay. It looks different, but it still tastes great. And so here we go. So this oven actually has a program where it automatically turns the heat down, but when you're at home, you're going to want to turn the temperature down to 375 when you put the bread in the oven. Oh, and one more thing, you're going to cook this for about 45 minutes. Kind of important information. All right, so we're back at our oven. It's been about 45 minutes. They're looking really nice, browned up and crispy, so I think we're good. Let's check and see. So now to cool, we'll take them out of the pan. I like to use a little butter knife around the edges. Helps the loaves to come out a little cleaner. Flip this over. Perfect. We have a little cooling rack here, but honestly, you don't really need this. You could just put it on a cutting board. And so there's kind of this rule with bread baking that you're not supposed to cut into the bread until like 8 or 10 hours after it's been baked. But if I've learned anything from my mentor, Dr. Jones, we don't always have to follow the rules. So let's see what happens if we cut it open a little bit early. I think it's going to be just tasty. It is quite hot though, so I might burn my tongue. I don't want to put this in my mouth yet, it's so hot. Yeah, maybe we leave the rule baking to Dr. Jones.